Three, two, one, zero.
Well, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Metaverse Church podcast. I'm Stuart, or Stu-Nami, from Lakeland VR, and with me is Goose from Cornerstone. What's going on, Goose?
Hey, man. Good to see you.
Same, bro. All right, so this is episode 2, and we're excited because today we are going to be doing a little bit of an overview of some of the VR platforms that are out there. We're going to be talking about what I call good bads, some breakdowns of each one, which might even give you a little bit of insight that you need to know of which platform you want to get into if you're looking at starting your own church, or your church is looking at jumping into the metaverse. And we'll even kind of touch on which one you should maybe even consider jumping into as you get into this. So, hey, Goose, for our kickoff question for this episode, this is what I wanted to ask. So we're outside of the holiday season, which for a lot of us, we're busy. But my kickoff question is, what wins have you seen lately in the church world regarding like VR? Like, what are some VR church wins that you've been seeing lately?
Yeah. The biggest win that I've seen, and it's not necessarily new, because we've seen this, over the last really year or even two, but just even recently, is disciples making disciples. I mean, it is amazing how, when I take a step back and look at the spiritual growth of some of the people who have come to Cornerstone, looking either for a deeper relationship with Christ or looking for Christ himself, like not really knowing him, and looking at their trajectory and seeing them now having been discipled by someone that we discipled. So not discipled by a pastor, but discipled by someone that one of our pastors have discipled. And it's like, that family tree is just starting to get like layers and layers deeper. And that is just like, that is the most encouraging thing for me, is to be able to look at that and say like, man, as you and I say, like, there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot we're probably doing wrong. But if there's one thing I know is going right, it's the Great Commission. It's going and making disciples. And so that for me is the thing that I come back to, the encouragement I come back to in the moments of discouragement, or, kind of questioning like, hey, what are we doing here? It's just like, oh man, but look at that. Like, that is exactly what our Savior commanded us to do. And he's working through us in that way. Let's just keep going.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. That's what it's all about. It's the idea of just being obedient to the commissioning that we've been given as Jesus followers to go and make disciples, who will then go off and make disciples. And that's how this thing is supposed to work. Those who get introduced to Jesus, who find this good thing, they don't hoard it to themselves, but they go and share it with somebody else, share that good thing with them, who then go off and share it. So, dude, for sure, that's a major, major win. So thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah.
So as you know, you and I talked about this, but what I'm excited about is over Christmas. So I got a buddy who he's a senior pastor of a church down in New Mexico, a mentor in my life. I love this dude to death. But he took over a senior pastor position a couple of years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And one of the things that I've noticed from afar is he really has just a heart for the city that he's in. And so he reached out to some of the other local churches in that community and said, hey, what would it look like for us to just gather together? Your worship team, our worship team, some teaching from you, some teaching from me, all that kind of stuff. What would it look like for us to be just one combined church for our community, to show that we're in this together? And so I've been noticing that from afar. And with Christmas that just happened, I reached out to a few people within a VR network that I'm leading, and I said, hey, you guys, I've seen somebody do this in one place. Like, we can easily apply that in VR. Would you be game for that? And so Yeah, a few of us, we put together a one VR Christmas Eve service that happened on December 22nd. So it wasn't Christmas Eve, it wasn't Christmas Adam, it was like pre-creation Christmas, if you will. That's my Genesis joke for the day. Uh, and so what we saw, this is cool. Like we knowing that you could get super creative within virtual reality, we actually took a step back and said, let's just make this super stripped down, super simple and easy. And so we put on this one combined Christmas Eve service, and we had over 90 people attend with, and the way that
Wow.
Altspace does this with their analytics, at any given point in time, the peak users, we had 40 people in the environment at one time, which really pushes the boundary to what Altspace allows in one single
Yep.
room, which was the low key experiment, I guess, if you could call it that we were trying to run, was Altspace, and we'll eventually talk about this, I'm sure, probably in our Altspace deep dive when we get to that episode. But Altspace has this cap per room of 50 people, but then they have this feature called Front Row, which basically creates second duplicate rooms, so you can get more people in who are witnessing the same event, same experience. So of all of us that gathered together on this, we were just kind of wondering, like, can we hit that 50 plus for this so we can see how Front Row works and whatnot. So didn't quite get there. We got close, but it was just cool to see churches come together to do one event. And I think what was even more cool was at the end of it, some of us gathered together at the end of the event and asked, hey, so do you recognize all these people that came in? And our best guess at this point is that there was a good third of the 90 plus people that showed up that we've never seen in any of our churches in VR
Wow.
before. And
That's amazing.
yeah, and here's another. I got to try to stop because this is just our warm up question. But here was the other heartbeat behind even doing this: is as I've been spending time in VR, and this, more specifically Altspace, I have heard people who have popped into our event and have said, why are there more and more churches hopping into virtual reality? If they're all worshiping the same God, if they're all chasing after the same thing, then why are there so many churches that are, in competition for our attention? And I've heard people say that, and I think that was even part of that heartbeat of taking it to these other churches and just saying, let's show them that our styles might be different,
Mm.
but we are all on the same mission. We're all chasing after the same thing. We're all worshiping the same God. And let's just show them that we are one, and let's be one for this event. So that's my win. That's what
That's
I'm
awesome.
excited about right now. That's kind of the tidal wave that I'm riding at this point as we enter in here to 2023. So
That's awesome. I like how you describe it as a tidal wave, because yeah, that should be the thing that we're collectively doing. There's a synergistic effect that we can have when we're pooling resources like that, and not just from a practical standpoint. Obviously, from a practical standpoint, that is true, but from a spiritual standpoint as well. We're called to have unity. So yeah, so that's amazing. That's awesome, man.
yeah, so good. All right. So that's our warm up question. So here we go. So we're talking about the different platforms because there are a ton out there, and there might be. So there, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to talk about, and I'm sure that there's more. In fact, I know that there's more because I've been doing some research as of late. But what I want to do in this episode is talk about the different platforms that are out there, and just kind of give like this 30,000 foot perspective of what each platform offers, and maybe even how you can do church in it. So really, it's kind of like what's good about it, what's bad about it. If we can get some kind of demographic from those, if you have any of that, we'll go for it. But so let's start with the one that I think you and I are both most familiar with. I know I am for sure. So we'll start with Altspace VR. So Altspace. In your opinion, what is good about doing church in Altspace? What's good about it?
Yeah, the best part about Altspace is how relatively easy it is to get up and running, and how easy it is to moderate the rooms. It's just a very it's a refined experience from a moderation standpoint. Um, and maybe that's only just in comparison to what else is out there, but it is true. It's very easy to deal with the issues that you have in VR with people, with a crowd of people, with somebody that is presumably giving a message, or even a video that is showing a message, and the desire to have order. So
Hmm.
maintaining order in Altspace is very easy, the easiest out of all of them, in my opinion, and so all of the other platforms. So I would say, for me, right off the bat, I would say that's the best thing about Altspace.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think for me, so again, context wise, you grew up playing games, you got into Unity, creating games, all that kind of stuff. I'm not a gamer whatsoever. So for me, anything that's going to be user friendly to get into and start working my way
Yeah,
through is going to be a big win, in my opinion. And for me, that's exactly what Altspace was. I was able to put on a headset and jump right in, get used to the controllers and all the features that come along with Altspace. Um, and yeah, it was just super easy. I think for the two different styles that you and I represent and how we do ministry in Altspace, I think that's the other good part about it is so you guys do live teaching with Cornerstone. For us at Lakeland, we live stream our service into Altspace, so it provides us that opportunity. So, you guys are doing teaching and pastoral care. For me, I'm allowed to allow my senior pastor's voice to be the loudest voice in the room, teaching wise, while I get to focus on pastoral care and helping people take a next step as they're coming into Lakeland VR. So, to me, what's good about Altspace is if you're wanting to get started, well, you could get started in any of the platforms that we're talking about. I would probably say this is the easiest one for you to get a true a social VR experience and go. That too with it is Allspace has their template worlds that you can take advantage of. So if you're like, I'm not a world builder, I don't know Unity, any of that kind of stuff. The beauty is for us with Lakeland, like we didn't start by having a Lakeland world that Goose built for us. We actually started with the base template, one of the base template worlds that Allspace provided, and said, let's make this our own. And just run with that. Let's just get a service up and going, which we call us our VR campus. We call it that. We call it a campus, a multi-site,
yep,
which really
yep,
has similar roots and style to what a multi-site would look like. Of here's a school building or a movie theater or whatever. Let's utilize the space that's already there and let's make it our own just in order to get a service up and going. So that's what Altspace provided, and we took advantage of it and ran with it. So,
right.
so what's bad about Altspace?
I was going to say you should go first on that one.
That's fine. Yeah. So for me, like with the way that we do our VR service, we are so heavy on relying on technology that if our Wi-Fi is bad, or there have been some cases where the
Mm,
live stream feature, the web projector that we use, I've had conversations with people that they'll come in who are very familiar with Altspace and very familiar with VR. I say, hey, sorry guys, we're having some technical difficulties today, and their response is, yeah, this is actually an Altspace thing. Like they don't have this
yeah,
web projector uh, fully under control yet. Like they get to this point where it's really steady, and for us, like it goes off great many times, but then every so often there's just this all right,
Yeah.
the image is cutting in and out, and that makes it really kind of hard. So there are elements to what Altspace is doing that, even though they've been around, so Altspace has been around since like 2015, something like that.
Oh, is it that old? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently they had like a crash in like 17, 18, and then they came back pretty strong. But
Okay, maybe
there's
that's
still,
what I'm thinking.
yeah. So there's still stuff that Altspace is trying to figure out at this point.
Sure.
But I would say, like, if you run a service like live streaming multi-site style, that could be a bad, but it's very few and in between when something like that happens. But it is a reality that's there.
Yeah, you know, even with live teaching, headsets go wonky, audio, Wi-Fi, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
My, I mean, I'm sure it's just like you. Every single Sunday, I know there's a chance that I got to get up there and preach. Jason may be the lead, maybe lead for that week and maybe preaching that week. But there's not a single Sunday that I don't go into the service knowing his headset could crash or die, or Wi-Fi could go down, or whatever it may be. And so yeah, so the tech issues on that, that's true. I know that particularly on the video player in Altspace, it can get a little hairy. Although I will tell you, it's not much better elsewhere. VR chat's not much better. Nobody's doing that particularly well at this point. Oh, man, I guess big screen. Although I'll confess I'm not an expert on big screen, but I imagine big screen's more stable because that's their main thing. But
Yeah.
I think for Altspace, I think for me, the thing that I wish I wish it had more adoption. To be honest with you, I think that there's a demographic in there that is relatively unique, as far as I can tell, in the VR space. There's a very particular VR demographic, or Altspace demographic, and I just kind of wish there was more. And so I'm just sort of hoping that as VR does get more adoption itself, that Altspace hangs on and builds that critical mass back up, because when it was really when there were a lot more people in there, it was really humming. So yeah, so that's, I wouldn't say that's a negative thing about it. It's just more of a wish list kind of thing. So yeah.
Sure. I will say, like, if you're, we talked about one of the good aspects of Altspace is that it's super user friendly and easy to get used to and run your service. But that being said, if you're looking to build a critical mass of church attenders in Altspace, exactly what you just said would probably be one of the huge asterisks that I would put to Altspace. I actually went back and looked at analytics for Altspace. I think so. Lakeland's been in it since March 2021, and from what I saw, every month since the time that we got in Altspace, the users has gotten lower and lower and lower. So
Yeah.
when the peak amount of users that I see on Altspace, and I'll have to confess, I'm not really sure what they mean by peak users, because I know, like, I'm about to say something that I know I've seen more than this number on there. But like, I have a chart that compares big screen, VR chat, rec room, and Altspace with each other. And to this point, like, if you were to look at the peak user for Altspace compared to any one of those other ones, it's just like big screen is 5 times more peak users than Altspace. Rec room is almost 20 to 30 times more users than Altspace. And then VR chat is, I'm going to butcher this percentage, like this amount, but like, seriously. So look, I won't even go with times. I'll just give like an actual number. in mid-December or like Christmas to January 1st, somewhere in there was one day that the peak user for Altspace was nine people. That's what they said was the peak user.
Mm.
And VR chat was 22,000
Yeah.
users, peak
Yeah.
users. So that's why I'm not great at math. That's, so that's why I'm in ministry. I just have to know 1272 and 150, but 40s, threes, all that kind of good stuff, holy numbers. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
that's one area too. Like, I would agree with you. I would keep an eye on, but I'm also with you that when it comes to true social experience in virtual reality, I'm really kind of hoping that Altspace can hang on there, because I was talking about it with my senior pastor, my executive pastor, just a little bit before you and I got on to record this, that there's, and I'm sure we'll have other episodes about this, but with MetaQuest Pro headset, Apple's got a headset that they're getting ready to launch. There's going to be this second wave of adopters and adapters
Yeah.
to VR, and I'm hoping that that's going to be the next wave into Altspace, just because it is a truly user friendly
Yeah.
social experience. So yeah.
Yep.
So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what do you think the demographic is for Altspace? What's male, female, Gen Z, Gen Y, X? If you were to try to put a pulse on it, what would you think?
Yeah.
Or do you know?
That's, I don't know from any statistics. I can just tell you anecdotally when I think about Altspace, and again, this is not universal, but by and large, it seems to be more of the kind of middle-aged, 35 plus crowd.
Hmm.
Um, that's most of the people that I interact with. Again, not exclusively, but I think of that demographic as a bit of an older, more mature crowd. And yeah, yeah. So that, I mean, very, very generally, that's what I would say when I think about Altspace is that would be one pinpoint that I would use. What about you? What's been your experience?
Well, but my question is, would you say more men or women in Altspace?
I don't know that I would say either way. I don't. I
Hmm.
can't. I couldn't tell you that I feel like it's one way or the other because I'm just kind of running through my Rolodex. It just seems it. I don't think of that as a one or the other gender heavy platform. The other ones I probably would hazard a guess of maybe like a percentage. But
Hmm.
if you were making me do a percentage, I feel like I would have the best shot at getting it right if I just said 50-50.
Okay, that's fair. Um, so my best guess right now, from what I've experienced, is Altspace tends to be. I'll give an example of this.
Yeah.
So when we got in to Altspace and we were starting to stream in our messages. So at the time that this conversation took place, what we were actually doing is we were taking the previous weekend's message and we were replaying it into Altspace. So not the live stream, but just a replay of the service. And one of the guys that was in on the service and kind of an early adopter of Lakeland when we got in there, one of his questions to me was, "Are is everybody that works at Lakeland just super young?" And that was the first
Mm.
time that I was just like, "Oh, okay. Well, what do you mean by young?" Because I don't necessarily know that I would consider myself that young anymore. I mean, when I started ministry, like early 20s, so that statement threw me off, and I asked him, "Why do you think that we're all young?" And he said, "Well, I've seen your senior pastor. He has seen our Next Steps pastor teach. He has seen our Next Gen pastor teach, and all of us from our Next Gen to our senior pastor fall within that range of like mid 30s to mid 40s. And so I was just like, wow, you think that we're young. So
Mm.
how old are you? Um, and what I quickly ended up finding out is the majority of the people that were coming and joining us at Lakeland VR were 50s, 60s,
Yeah.
if not some sprinkled in there a little bit older. And I was just like,
Yep.
not the demographic I thought that we were going to see in here.
Yep. Yep. Same experience. Yep.
And I'll even say this, what I've come to experience as well is the 50 to 60-year-olds tend to join an event, stay in for the service a good chunk of the time, whereas the millennials, or I don't know the generations too well, Gen Z, I guess, would be the next one below millennials. If they pop in, they pop out pretty quick.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily mean, yeah, that doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily
No,
mean that the demographic.
right.
Go ahead.
I find that the younger crowd, well, you know what? That's not fair. I was going to say, I find that the younger crowd want to be in a spot where it's more of a discussion, like where if it's not a discussion when they walk in,
Fair.
they're like, no, I'm here to talk. And so, but realistically, I don't think that that's exclusive to them. Everybody that I've met in there has something to say, and they want to be heard. And this is just you. I mean, every human wants to be heard. So this is from our children to our people in the physical church, and people want to be heard, and that's fair. I just think maybe the older crowd's a little more patient. They're just, well, I got to sit through the sermon and listen to it, and before I get to say my piece, okay, I'll do that. And so I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm speculating, but that's probably what's going on.
No, I think that's pretty fair. I think that's a good speculation. So, yeah, because
Oh,
I think like millennials and younger generation. So I've said this before, especially when I was doing next gen ministry, and this is why I believe that the next generation has a major opportunity um, to lead the next revival around the world. It's because when I watch like any news station, whenever there's any kind of rioting that's going on or movement taking place, it's always faces my age or younger that tend to be leading the cause in that. And I just believe that the younger generation, they're looking for a cause to get behind, to throw their hat in the middle of
yeah,
the ring for and say, this is what I stand for, and this is the hill that I'll die on. But because that, I'll also say that they're way more boisterous in their approach. So probably less patient, whereas that the older generation that you were talking
yeah.
about probably do have a little bit more patience to them. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if you
Yeah.
study revivals, that totally checks out, because I know at one point I was studying revivals, and it was remarkable how many of them started on college campuses. You know, way back when college campuses had Jesus on them. But I'm joking, but like no, but when like faculty, and it was an actual like legitimate like endeavor to study, the Christ, but they started on college campus. I mean, it really was impressed upon me as I studied that, how important it is to reach that age, the high school and college age, for that, for that not for that purpose, but just to sort of like afford that opportunity. If we're gonna see a revival, that's where it's going to happen. I mean, it's got to be. And so yeah, so that whole idea checks out. I should also say, after I said that, I thought about VR chat and how many of the younger crowd we have there, and how many patiently and respectfully sit through our messages,
Hmm.
which Pastor Jason makes no qualms about, going 40, 50 minutes. And it's great because they all wait. I mean, he's just, he's awesome. So we're blessed to have somebody that we want to listen to for 40 or 50 minutes, but they're really good. Like and they're much young. I know I'm jumping the gun about VR chat, but I felt it important to qualify what I said, because actually I don't know that actually what I say, I even believe what I said. Who knows? It could just be it could just be, yeah, it could be the platform. It could be the platform, rather than
Yeah.
necessarily a generational thing. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So, in your opinion, because we do view our church ministry completely different than each other, when you look at Altspace and what you know of Altspace thus far, what do you, in Goose's humble opinion, what is the best way to do church in Altspace?
Um, I I don't know. No, Pastor Jason and I talk about this often because, like I just said, he comes from very. And again, I mean, this is all stuff that he has said vocally, openly and publicly, and he's very open about it. So I don't mind talking about it. But yeah, he comes from a pretty, I would say traditional, but I guess that's the right word, approach to preaching the word. Um, and I have thrown at him, the possibility of changing it up, doing something different. Not for the sake of doing something different. It's thought out. It's looking at the platform, looking at what it's good at, what it's not good at, looking at the people, and saying, look, well, would this better advance the gospel here than a more traditional model? And we've talked about it quite a bit, and I still think that there is a model that is far more focused on a pure dialogue than a monologue and then a dialogue, which is what we do. We have a monologue, we have the preaching of the word, and then we open it up to a dialogue. And I wouldn't say that we like give them the same amount of weight or anything like that, but there is quite a bit of time budgeted for our Q&A. And so it's not just something that just happens to be, hey, if anybody's got a question, we're here to answer it. Like, it's baked into our service order. It is a part of our service, which is the dialogue. I do wonder, though, if there is out there a way to incorporate that dialogue right out of the gate and still have that, that pastor and flock relationship, and the preaching and the teaching and that. And we just haven't settled on it. I've tried a few different ways to, like, maybe when I preach to try that out, and some of it has gone well, some of it didn't really land, and so that's why I say I don't know. Right now, it's working the way that we do it with live teaching, Q&A after. I think that is really good. The one kind of drawback is the one drawback to the model of how you use that time is, Pastor Jason is such an amazing relational pastor. That is, aside from being a great teacher, he has just an amazing heart for the flock, and he also delivers it in such a way that it is very evident. I love our flock as much as he does, but it doesn't seem that way to them. I just have a strange way of showing it, and it results in some kind of, maybe strained relationships. And so that's not my gifting, is to like, in that care way. And so he is amazing at that. And what we've talked about is, man, you've only got so much time in here, and so much of it is spent in monologue. Is there a way to lean into your shepherding and care side of discipleship while you're here, and somehow get the message in a different way? And so, because in a sense, it's like, if we did live teaching, then he would be able to not have to, that would be, we would recapture some of that time.
Yeah.
But then he's not there, so it's like, either, so in one sense, like, it's almost the worst of both worlds. And it doesn't sound great, because I'm not saying we're doing it wrong. I'm just saying we've talked, and this is just a conversation he and I have had, where it's like, man, you're spending all this time in there, but none of it is on the relational side. And so it's like, you're pouring yourself out when your time is so finite, because he's running a physical church himself, right? Like
Right.
that, and then he's in there having to spend all this time, and it's like, man, could there be a better use of your time? And I feel like if I were, I would vote to spend more of his time engaging with people in a dialogue, so that on that care side, and getting the teaching side another way. But we just haven't found the right thing where we're like, you know what, let's try that. We've talked about it, and so anyway, so I just to say, you asked a question that I've got a lot of thought on, so that's why I'm going so long on it. But because we talk so much about it, and it's just like, we're always thinking, is there a better way to do this? Is there a better way to do this? So right now, I would advocate for live teaching, more from a relational side than just the content side, because the content honestly can get there. And it's the audio is the audio. Like, it hits my ears, and it's audio. Like, so what's the difference? I think the as long as you've got some sort of in-person care side, which I know, again, you guys have in your way, in a different way, that to me is the most important thing. It's just I guess I would say that I'll end with this. The one thing VR is terrible at, and nobody should be thinking this way, is that it is another style of live stream or an extension of live stream. You can live stream, like, you can do it. Right. You guys do it well.
Right.
But that it's not just another place to show your video. It is, as you said, it is a campus. And that is the way to approach it. So as long as I would say the right way to do it is, approach it like a campus, and figure out what you're good at, and do it that way.
Yeah, dude. So that's a great spot for me to pick up on. Just because, like, if you're listening to this, watching this, whatever, and you're saying, well, I don't know that our church, like, you might be a digital church planner or virtual reality church planner, and you want to go in and you want to teach live, like, you want to develop your own notes, put on the headset and speak it out like you would on a Sunday morning or whatever. That's great. And there's definitely a way to do it. Cornerstone's doing it. I know a lot of other churches in VR that are doing it. There are also a lot of churches that are doing it our way by live streaming their service in, their senior pastors teaching, and all that kind of good stuff. I will say this, though, that there was at one point in time for us, and if you end up doing it the way that Lakeland does it, with the live streaming in, yes, it is not just another way to live stream, because my conviction at one point was this: if somebody in our town, our county, was going through some kind of trauma, whatever, dark time, pitfall, whatever, and they didn't know who to turn to, they can see Lakeland Church physical building and say, maybe somebody in there can help me in any kind of way, right? So if you're just a virtual reality church that is live streaming your weekend service, your Sunday service, whatever it is, and then the event's done and you're gone, you will never truly be a church in virtual reality. And my conviction was, we can't do that, because in the same way that our physical building is here day and night, and there's a way to connect with a local pastor if somebody needed to, we needed in some way in VR, had to bring that in for Lakeland VR, that we had to be approachable and reachable throughout the week if somebody needed to talk to a pastor or somebody who is a follower of Jesus. So we took what we were doing of just live streaming on Sunday, and we started developing groups that would meet throughout the week under that banner of Lakeland VR, in the typical way that the physical church would do it. Of, we got our service on Sunday, but we have small groups for you to get plugged into throughout the week. I wanted to do that. So we took the approach of we're going to try to saturate the main event board in Altspace, which is also a good aspect of Altspace is you can get on their main event board to advertise your service, which we didn't talk about, which I don't really think a lot of the other platforms allow for that. But
Great point.
But I wanted to saturate that event board where people who are hopping into Altspace, those Altspace users, became so accustomed to seeing Lakeland VR every single time they put on their headset and every single time that they logged into Altspace. That way, if there was ever a point in time in their life that they were trying to escape from something or search out an answer for or find something out about Jesus, VR and Lakeland became synonymous with each other. And that people just knew I can go there in order to talk to somebody about XYZ. So I think that's kind of the beauty of the answer to this question is I don't actually know that there is a best way. I think that we're still trying to figure it out in the same way that you guys are still trying to figure it out. What I love about this here is that we represent two completely different styles in the way to do ministry in Altspace. And I would say both work really, really well. We're both seeing some kind of impact happening, lives being changed, conversation, dialogue happening. People who would normally wouldn't walk through the physical doors of a church building are finding their way into a VR church and asking questions that they've always had, and feeling comfortable enough to take that next step. So, kind of no real answer to it, I guess. But yeah. Okay. Can I make a pivot on us?
Yeah, man.
Okay. So this whole episode was supposed to be a 30,000 foot perspective of each of the platforms. And it quickly became a deep dive on Altspace. So
yeah, it sure did.
This is what I know about podcast listeners and YouTubers and whatnot is your time is valuable and precious. And when the content is too long, you won't digest it. So I'm going to make the pivot and say, this is our deep dive on Altspace. There's probably a lot more that we could have talked about Altspace, but I feel like that's a really good intro into it anyways. One question that I had that will wait until we get to the end of these deep dives is which one should someone consider if they're looking to start a church in VR. So we'll hold that one till after we've investigated, talked through each of these. So let's close out with this question. Goose, what's something that you've heard coming down the pipeline in the metaverse world that churches should be keeping an eye on? Or what's something that excites you that you've heard coming down the pipeline?
Yeah. Well, so I've got one thing I'm personally working on that I'm excited about, but I'm not gonna use that one. I'm not gonna do self-promotion. But I think in the same vein, I will say this. I think let me say it this way. What I'm excited about is we just said that VR ministry is not live stream, and it's not. But if you've spent any time in digital ministry, particularly in live stream, you know that the sort of the never-ending question is how to build that as a community. How do you make it more than just people that pop in when they're on vacation? And for the people who are afar and are regular attenders, how do we make that more of a community? There will be, whether I do it or someone else does it, there will be a blending of what we have learned in the metaverse and VR and live stream, and we're gonna pull live stream and we're gonna sort of up the game for traditional live stream using what we've learned here. in VR and metaverse. I say VR, but the desktop experience is sort of synonymous with that. I'm excited to sort of like throw that lifeline over to just the traditional live stream and start to like pull them in and bridge that gap. And I just say it's gonna mesh, it's gonna blend, it's all, and it's gonna be awesome because we talked about critical mass, and I believe we're going to achieve that critical mass from the people who are not just only in VR, but just all digital church attenders as a whole. So I'm excited about that.
Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of the Metaverse Church podcast. Hopefully it was a blessing and beneficial to you. If you have any questions for myself or for Goose, please email us at metaversechurchpodcast@gmail.com. If you're even leading a church in the metaverse, we would love to get to know you and maybe even invite you onto the show to share with us what it is that you guys are doing in the metaverse. So please be sure to reach out to us through that same email as well. Something that you can do to help us, if we're helping you, subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. Also leave a rating and a review. Those kinds of next steps help get this out to more people to help them as well. If you're interested in learning more about what we do at Lakeland VR or what's going on at Cornerstones, please reach out to us. We'll get you an invite to our VR events so you can get more hands-on experience with what we have going on. We'll be back with you next week with a brand new episode. So until then, be blessed.